Hey everyone, and welcome to my guide for everything to do with VOD reviewing. I think it's something that's very, very important, and I think also there are a lot of common problems that people have, so we'll go over all of those, as well as answer some of the questions that I get asked in Discord all the time about whether you should review yourself, whether you should review others, how you might go about doing that, as well as where to find VODs, and some useful tools for either recording games or for taking notes. As always, there will be a bunch of timestamps in the description below, so make sure to check that out. Let's start off with how to review other people. I think reviewing other people is more important and also a lot easier, and I'll kind of explain my full thoughts behind that later in the video, but for now let's just talk about how you do it. So here's a VOD. We have a rookie. If I move my cam, you can see there, very handsome man in the corner. So basically, when you're reviewing other people's gameplay, there's a couple things that I would really advise. The first one is to really focus on finding some specific piece of information or some specific part of the game. I think a lot of you, when you kind of watch VODs, you watch the whole thing. And normally I think that's bad. And the reason is because you really want to take something from it and kind of focus on that as opposed to trying to take in everything at once, because it can be very overwhelming. So whenever I watch other people's videos, I'm always looking for specific information. I might be trying to find okay, how does he play this laning phase? Or how does he play like the mid game? How does he play the team fights? You know, something like that. And then I'll just go have a look at that. So if, for example, I wanted to figure out how he plays the lane phase, I might watch and take notes on perhaps the first 10 minutes or something. Just kind of watch how he plays whatever match. There's Tillia versus Syndra, for example, right? Or if I wanted to watch the mid game, I might start this VOD at 15 minutes in. So I might skip ahead to something like this and be like, okay, mid game starting. Now I want to see kind of what decisions he makes in the mid game. So I think that's very, very important and very underrated. I think if you just watch the whole VOD through, there's so much to write down. There's so much to think about that it can be incredibly overwhelming. And yeah, really try and another good way you can do it is if you're, rather than just focusing on one specific aspect of the game, maybe even focus on one extremely specific piece of information. For example, maybe you're not sure what to buy in the Taliyah versus Syndra matchup. So then you can kind of go through and literally just skip through and just watch all his bases and see what he's buying, right? So an example might be maybe he buys Merc Treads here against Syndra, or maybe on his first base he gets boots because he needs the movement speed. So the more specific you can get with it, the better. I think the most general you should ever be with it is just focusing on one phase of the game. But even within that phase of the game, you might want to narrow it down more. Maybe you want to look at the laning phase and you want to specifically look at how he trades or how he controls the wave, something like that. The more specific you can get, the better. Now, the next thing that I think is important is trying to think about the why behind things. So as we'll talk about later, this is potentially a bit of a problem sometimes. It can be a bit of a pitfall in that you might take away the wrong thing, the wrong reasoning. But normally I think it's good to try and copy their gameplay for sure. I think if you copy their gameplay, even if it's not quite correct, it's going to be better than what you're doing most likely. But if you can think about the why behind their doing things, that's really important. So you might think okay, why is he pushing this wave? Or, why did he buy that item? I think it's much better if, even if you take the wrong thing away from it, that you can at least stop and think to yourself okay, what is the possible reasoning behind this? Again, the lower you are, the more likely you get it wrong. But I think if you watch enough VODs, you might start to kind of form an understanding of why things might be done. For example, when I was new to League, right? When I was I think must have been gold or plat. I watched a lot of Easy Hoon VODs because I was a Cassiopeia 1 trick at the time. And I would be okay, so why did he trade here? And then over time I realized oh, you try and punish people when they don't have cooldowns. That makes sense, right? And then that was kind of a concept that you could elaborate on more and more as you get higher and higher rank, right? And some other things, for example, if we go way higher, if when I was a pro player, for example, one thing that I realized was I watched this VOD of Rookies Zoe versus Caps Vladimir. I believe it was at MSI 2019 or something. I've actually tried to look for the VOD, but I couldn't find it on YouTube. But anyway, I was watching this VOD, and that's when I really realized the power of the 3-wave crash, of the fact that he basically just bullied Caps for the first 3 waves, had himself a huge advantage, and then let it push back to him. So then I was obviously at that time I was quite a bit higher ranked, but what I realized was, again, I was trying to think about the why. Okay, what does this 3-wave actually do for you? And it's okay, he's level 3 versus level 2, he's level 2 versus level 1, he's got all these creeps. So even without having the correct understanding, altogether at that time, I slowly, I guess, realized over time, I guess, how how things that I do might lead to that. And naturally, as you get higher rank, you'll kind of get better at that. Now, another thing, I guess like the last thing that I think is really important for reviewing other people is you can try the pause method, is what I call it. So what you can do is if you're struggling to kind of take something away or you're not really sure what to take away, a good thing to do is to kind of just pause every 30 seconds and kind of like plan what you're going to do and then see if it's different. So like, for example, it can be, I think, a real good as well if you can time out the waves. So let's say these waves are meeting. Let's just pause the replay and be like, okay, what do we want to do here for the next 30 seconds? It can be kind of difficult because like I didn't watch the rest of the VOD, so I don't really know what the game state is. I think that Cinder is reset. So you might be thinking, okay, maybe here that you want to push the wave, or you might be thinking, maybe you need to ward and then push the wave, or maybe you don't want to push the wave at all because you can't push a cannon wave in time before Cinder gets back, right? Like those could be possible decisions. So you just want to kind of plan your next 30 seconds. And then if his 30 seconds is like different from yours, if what he is doing on this next wave is like different from what you would do, then perhaps you'd need to think about it. Like for example, maybe the reason he chose not to push this is that like he doesn't have Ghost, maybe he doesn't know where Graves is. We can't see his map here, unfortunately, because it is covered, but maybe he doesn't know where Graves is. Maybe he like wants to slow push instead of fast pushing. Like there could be different reasons. And again, this replay is like maybe kind of bad because we can't see the map, but like that's what you'd kind of be wanting to thinking. And then like, okay, after another 30 seconds pass, like maybe right here, let's pause again. Okay, maybe now what do we want to do? Maybe you would decide to push here. And then if he doesn't, you can be like, okay, why didn't he push? So it's basically, we're trying to put themselves in their shoes. We're trying to focus on specific aspects of the game. And we're just trying to take away as much learning from that replay as we can. Next, we're going to talk about how to actually review your own gameplay, which I think isn't as important, but it's still important to know. And there's a few different ways you can review your own gameplay. The first one is to just focus on deaths, because that's kind of the obvious one. Now, a great program for this is to use Outplayed, which is what I have open here, because you can come over to this and you can actually just click death and then filter by deaths. And what that allows you to do is just skip through this timeline here and just go to all the times you died in the game, and then you can kind of look at them. So when you're looking at deaths, there's a couple things you're trying to find. First, you're trying to find the actual like root cause of your death. Like a lot of the time, for example, you will die and it will be because you wasted flash earlier, or you might die and it be because you're playing too aggressive without flash. So a lot of the time, the death itself is kind of a product of something that happened earlier. And again, a way you can kind of figure this out is to just go back 30 seconds in time and see if there's anything that leads up to it. Obviously, not every death is going to be like that, but a lot of them will be. And I think that can really help with, again, trying to take the right thing away. So things you can consider just as kind of general things to help with figuring out why you died is thinking about like, did you have flash or not? Where were you positioned? Like, were you too far ahead of your teammates in a team fight? Were your teammates even nearby? Like, were you too far up by yourself? Did you have no wards down? That sort of stuff. There can be a lot of stuff that leads to it. And what you're trying to do is over time, like maybe over a week, you play like, I don't know, 10 or 15 games, and you're trying to find out, is there a common thing? Like maybe in all those games, or maybe in most of those games, you frequently die without wards. So like what that would mean is like, okay, now you have a pretty good clue of like what you actually need to work on. You probably need to go through and look at your warding, or you need to watch a video on warding, or perhaps you need to review someone else's VOD and kind of take a look at how they ward, something like that. So that's method number one. The other method you can do is kind of just compare. Again, try and focus on one phase of the game. So something I really like to do is if I play a lane, I like to look it up on YouTube after. So this game, see, do I have another VOD? No, we don't have that one. Something I like to do, like let's say, for example, that I was playing this matchup here. If I was playing like Katarina versus Veigar, what I would probably do after the game is I would just go on YouTube, I would just type in Katarina versus Veigar Pro Replay or something like that, and then I would just watch the first 10 minutes of the laning phase and be like, how closely did this compare to my gameplay? Like, was I, for example, down 10 CS when I should be up 10 CS? Or, did I build the same items? And then again, if you want to get more specific, like, was I punishing his cooldowns at the right time? Or was I trading at the right time? Did I do the same thing with the wave? Basically, we're just trying to use it, again, as kind of like a way to check how closely does our gameplay actually resemble theirs. If you're ever not sure about the actual takeaway, something I kind of like to do just as like a personal thing, I guess, is try and find the most aggressive solution or outcome. Like, for example, if again we watch our Katarina versus Veigar VOD or whatever, right? And we notice that in some of the lanes, like the Katarina barely trades, they just like don't really do anything. Or in some of them, maybe they play really aggressively. Personally, I tend to prefer the aggressive option. So that's something I like tend to look towards. Some of you might favor the defensive option. Some of you might favor the scaling option or whatever. The reason I tend to prefer the aggressive option is because I find it is is easier to play aggressive, and then your mistake is very obvious because it gets punished, than it is to play too passively. Because if you play too passively, it's easy perhaps for someone else to look at your gameplay and figure out that, maybe you can play more aggressive here, but I think it's quite hard to do on your own. So I tend to look for the more aggressive solutions because at least that gives me like a better feedback loop of if I do something too aggressive, I get punished for it, and then I know that was too aggressive. So should you review both your games and other people's games, and what's a good balance? I think that you should, but if you can only do one, it's much better to watch other people's replays. So the way I kind of do it, and I think the way you guys should do it too, is you should either watch guides like my videos or watch other people's VODs to try and find the concept first. So maybe you find the concept of like three-wave crashing, or maybe you find the concept of like harassing your opponent when they go for creeps, or maybe punishing them when their cooldowns are down, that sort of stuff, right? You're trying to find the concept from other people. And then what you want to do is you want to use your own VODs to kind of check if you're doing that concept. So for example, let's say that you go and watch my like farming guide or actually let's say you watch my laning guide, right? And we just take away from it, okay, I need to harass people when they go for CS. So then what you do, you'd go up, you'd queue play a game with that in mind. And then afterwards, you would kind of quickly skim through that game, literally just skimming through maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes on probably 2 times speed, and just check, are you actually are you actually harassing them when they go for CS or not? You're kind of checking, did I do the concept well? How well did I do it? And do I need to focus on it more? So I think that's kind of the pipeline of, find the concept from someone else, then like go play it yourself, try and like review it and see if you're doing it. And then if you're still having problems with it, maybe go back to the other replays and, check, maybe is there something I'm missing? Maybe I just need to practice a bit more. Maybe it needs to become a habit, something like that. As for what balance is good, I would say that you kind of want to watch like, I would be thinking generally like watching more of other people's VODs is better than watching more of your own VODs. But I'd be thinking something like, okay, let's say I spend like 10 or 20 minutes going through a couple laning phase VODs trying to figure out my concept, right? Or you're spending time watching a guide. I think after that, you're looking to just like queue up some games, really focus on like learning that concept, practicing it. Maybe if you want, you can like look up the lanes you played afterwards on YouTube and kind of go through them. And then I think minimal time should be spent watching your own VOD. I would honestly say like maybe 5 minutes at a time, just like quickly looking through it at like the concept you're working on. Like, did you harass on all the CS? Did you position well in the team fights? Just like skim through them all. Like you can even skim through all the team fights or looking through all your deaths. I think the least amount of time total should be spent on reviewing your own games. At least like that's my opinion of it. But hey, like everyone's different. I mean, if you want to do it your way, I'm not going to say no. I think also, another question I get is like, how many games should I play like per replay? In my mind, it's like, if you don't know what to work on, then there is no point playing games at all. Like until you know what to work on, you should be like watching guides and watching VOD. Until you like know what's wrong or like have something to focus on, just spamming league games, it does nothing for you. It literally does nothing. So, but once you have that, then you want to play, I guess, like as many games as you need to kind of like work on that in a way. And there's probably not much point trying to work on any new concepts until you've mastered that one. There is maybe like an argument for you could go back and watch some more VODs and try and really like solidify the concept. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but basically it's like, I don't know, there's no like perfect method of like, oh, you should play 3 games to every VOD and then, spend 20 minutes on this. I don't think there's anything like that. For me, it's just, if you have something to work on, you want to like be queuing up and reviewing that and then like checking that concept again in other games. If you don't have anything to work on, then that suggests that you really shouldn't be queuing up. I think, yeah, if you're queuing up and you just have like no idea what you want to work on, that's like a massive problem. And you definitely need to try and sort that out like as soon as possible, because it's just like the quickest way to just waste your time, just like queuing up a game a day of League of Legends and like just coming out the exact same player. What are the most common problems I see when people VOD review and how should we fix them? Probably the most common and also the hardest to fix is people taking the wrong things away. So as I kind of said in this video, people may be saying that, oh, this death was because they didn't have flash when it could be because they didn't have wards or something like that, right? And that is pretty tough to solve in my mind, especially if you're lower elo, like your game knowledge is not going to be as high or as strong as some other people's in the game. So it can be difficult to take the wrong things away. Now, there's like 2 parts to this. I think one, a way to solve it is to obviously like watch streamers that explain stuff. So like on my stream, for example, like I do have a lot of explaining, or like in my fully explained videos, I do that as well. And I think most other roles have someone like that as well. Maybe I'll make a list on that sometime. But yeah, you could try find someone essentially that explains their thoughts. The other part of it is that it's important to remember that while if you can know the reasoning behind plays and stuff, like that's really good. It can help you become more consistent and stuff like that. Honestly, a lot of it is just emulating the gameplay in the first place. So let's say you play a lane and you don't push the lane at all. If you watch like a faker VOD and you're confused as to why he like two-wave crashes instead of three-wave crashes, even if you just two-wave push, it's going to be better than what you're doing already, you know? So in a way, like, while you might be only getting, say you're getting like 90% of the way there instead of like 100% out of the optimization, like it's not going to matter unless you're like really high rank. So I think the most important thing is to just like try and emulate the gameplay. And obviously emulating the gameplay becomes easier if you fully understand the reasoning behind it. But I think that anyone can look at these VODs and be like, okay, this gameplay looks like almost nothing like mine. And so you can just like kind of, I don't want you to just copy it and then not think about it at all. But if you copy it and even have the wrong reasoning for it, it's still going to be better, most likely, than what you're doing. And as you get like higher rank, you will just naturally start to fill in the gaps, right? Like let's say it's like 90% of the way there as to what Faker was doing. If that takes you up to something like Challenger, by the time you are Challenger, you're probably going to realize like, oh, this is why he did it. Because just, you know, through getting there, through playing the games, through getting better at the games, just like your understanding just widens, right? The second big problem that I see is people either not retaining the information or just moving on to the next step too fast. So the first part of this is that I think a lot of people, when they're learning League, they think very short term. You know, like they're kind of thinking, okay, I want to learn this today and I want to learn this tomorrow kind of thing. But for most people, like you're probably going to play League for like at least a couple years, right? Maybe 3 or more. Like personally, I started playing in 2014. So I guess I've played like almost 10 years now, right? So anything you learn, it's like a future investment. You're gonna be using this for like the rest of your League career. So it makes sense to like really solidify the things you're learning. That way you don't have to kind of, you know, you learn it like half, kind of like not as well as you should have, and then you kind of end up coming back to it because you've forgotten some of it. Like you really want to make sure this is really habitual and just solid, and then you don't have to come back to it. And I think like you can afford to take time. So like people might spend, say, only 5 games working on a concept, whereas like honestly, it's completely fine to spend, say, 50 games making sure you've really got something down so that you just like never have to come back to it again, especially if it's something that affects the game a lot. You know, like if we talked in our fundamental tier list about like what things are most important, those ones at the top, like if you learn those, if you spent an entire season just getting better at your laning, it would be so useful, right, for the like rest of your League career essentially. And I guess another part with just like actually retaining the information itself is that it can be good to like write things down or take notes. So like something I used to do is I'd just like make a spreadsheet or a Google Doc, and I just try to write like a couple things that I take from every game I play or the every replay I watch. Just like a couple little like one-line things of like maybe, I don't know, like be careful when I don't have vision, or like play more aggressive when they don't have cooldowns, for example, or like buy Merc Treads against double AP mid jungle. Again, if you like try and take these like small little bits of information over a long time, they really add up. And I think, well, it's probably different for everyone. I really felt like for me that writing them down helped like actually solidify them, I guess, in my brain, as opposed to being just like, I know this, but then like when I get into game, I like autopilot and forget about it. So I think like, yeah, really try and just take the time to make sure that you're actually learning it and you're not just like, you know, haphazardly doing this and then the next day you do a different concept or whatever, and try find a way to make sure that the information is retained either through like note taking, or even just like some of you will probably just like play a lot of games focusing on one concept. Like if you queue up and you just like focus all on the laning phase, it might just become natural. You're like, you might not even need to take notes at all. And finally, what are some useful kind of apps and tools that you can use for helping to improve? So as I mentioned earlier in the video, Outplay.tv is probably the best for recording your gameplay. If you don't want to do this, OBS is another one. It's fairly easy to set up, but I think Outplay is much easier. Basically, you pretty much just download Outplay, come into here, select League of Legends, and then you just change this to full match, so it captures the entire match. And you can kind of like mess with stuff in here, like the how much like storage it's going to take, like how high quality it is. Like you can mess with all this, but the main thing is just turning this to full match, and it's very, very easy to set up. You can also use it to make clips, but that's not really something I've ever done with it. Well, finding VODs is a couple different ways. So one way is just to come to OPGG and search the person that you want to watch. So like, for example, we might come to the Korean leaderboard like this. You can swap servers, just click on quad here, and we'll have like a bunch of different replays that can be downloaded. And then all you'll really need to do is you'll need to click on this, press OK, and then come down here and just launch it. Now, worth noting is that you can't play replays from old patches. So as you guys are watching this, it'll probably be when 13.6 is just released, which means because it's been released on my server now. So it should be released for you guys tomorrow as of when I'm recording this, but we'll see when you guys get this video. I think it'll be a couple days later. And so that means like you won't be able to open these old replays, but you'll be able to come through and just open any of these and play them. Another thing you can do that obviously isn't related to the patch is you can just come to YouTube. So like, for example, if you want to look up a specific matchup, we can look up like LoL versus Syndra, and then we've got tons of options. If we want to filter by like, maybe we want to filter by the last year because we only want to find stuff that's like recent, or, we can even go like newer than that and filter by this month. I find this to be very useful. Or if you want to look up like a specific player replays, again, you can look up like LoL rookie pro replays. Like Rookie's my favorite player, so I tend to watch lots of his videos. But yeah, you can kind of do anything like that in order to find VODs. There's so many ways to find VODs. I guess other ways is there's like League of Crafts. I haven't really experimented with that, but I've heard that you can get VODs off there. Another way, I guess, for watching your own VODs is that you can download VODs in the client. Like if you come here, you can go into match history. These are all from last patch, like all these ranked games down here. So again, I can't open them. You can also search people in client. So like, for example, if you're on the same server as them, like let's say I want to search like Coach Curtis or whatever, right? I can come to his match history and I'd be able to download them. Again, all his from last patch as well. So not much we can do about it. But yeah, you can kind of do that to watch people's replays on your own service. So guys, that's going to be it for my guide on how to VOD review. Keep in mind that it's definitely a very personalized thing, right? Lots of people do it differently. If you want another person's opinion, I know Coach Curtis has a guide on how to VOD review, so definitely check that out as well. Otherwise, if you did like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.